Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. In our previous class on Vedanta and the science of human possibilities, we ended our discussion with three great thinkers, three great scientists whose ideas have shaped the modern world as we see it now. So, but it is not very clear whether their interpretation of the world, of the universe, or of the uh, position of man in this whole universe, in this whole creation, is the highest view. So they have, as we saw last time, that they have significantly reduced the human possibilities and limiting them to the physical or at the most mental possibilities. They were not explored human being in depth. That is the reason in their fields they were definitely path breakers, you can say. As far as the physical possibilities of a human being are concerned, they were absolutely right because they were right in the sense their observation is based on their deduction or their theories. They are based on concrete experimentation, concrete evidence which the sense world gave them, and also the various facets of the mind which were probed by them, which were studied by them. So we have Copernicus, we have Darwin, and we have Freud. They are the three people who uh, determined how Western rational modern thinking or rational modern thinking, it might have begun in the West, but it is spread all over the world. But they dealt with the physical reality, and nothing wrong. They should be the efforts that they made have to be appreciated. But that does not limit whatever knowledge, in the words of Isaac Newton, who humbly said that I have just explored a few grains of sand in this whole vast seashore. A few grains of sand I have analyzed and placed it before the entire humanity. But I don't claim to have understood everything. So also, though these scientists discovered certain truths, certain infallible truths, of course, based on their observation, Copernicus began with the revelation of the vastness of this universe, the planets and the planetary motion, and then showed the consequent triviality of the Earth in comparison to this vast expanse of galaxies and universes. And he showed that it is not that the Earth is flat, but it is one of the bodies in this vast universe, which is just a speck in this galaxies. There are unlimited number of galaxies, and we are just an insignificant poor molecule. And that's why he showed the triviality, he had the humility to show to the entire world that how trivial our planet Earth, with all its glory, with all our ego, pride, and other things, if we consider the universes or the whole universe as a whole, then our size or our magnitude is almost insignificant. So he reduced us, at least in a gross way, to a poor molecule, a simple molecule in this vast collection of atoms and molecules of the universe and the vast spaces that have been discovered since. So, but that is not, but then with this definition of human beings and the creation, where do we go? Where is the infinitude or the salvation or the great things, the divinity of man, which all the prophets spoke about? Why can't we see it? If we are so insignificant, then how can a man even claim to know that he knows everything about God or the divine or the purpose of creation? Of course, he cannot know it with his ordinary intellect. But is it the final word in our exploring the human possibilities? Are there no further possibilities? Of course, Darwin extended the search, just as Copernicus studied the celestial objects, the planets, the stars, and all the heavenly bodies. Darwin tried to trace the truth or the secret of the living universe and showed in his own way. He wrote how human beings had the wonderful theory of evolution, which is definitely true when it comes to the gross living animal and the plant world. And he showed the ancestry not to the stars and as Copernicus had done, stars and their glory, the great galaxies. He didn't go there that far. He just reduced it to some kind of primordial biological soup, as they say. How life first came, that was their quest. And naturally, it is a genuine scientific quest that how we can explain the theory of creation with all the Big Bang theory, but why on this particular planet? Why the conditions were such that the so-called biological soup, some kind of mud where fermentation took place and the primitive objects, protein molecules were created, and then viruses, and then they evolved into larger and more complicated animals, plants, and then the whole kingdom. If that is the case, if that is the whole truth about evolution, what preceded that? And what about the other planets? Is life there on the other planets? So though uh, he made a very honest and a very successful attempt in more or less formulating certain theories which showed that man's ancestry is, he reduced it to some kind of primordial soup on the earth. Of course, it is the only planet that we know is inhabited by living organisms. So he gave some explanation, and our ancestry, we trace our ancestry to these bacteria and viruses. That's not glorifying human being. When Christ said God should be worshipped in the whole idea of divinity, such a glorious idea, the glory of God, the glory of the Spirit. So all the prophets, they spoke of some possibilities, the spiritual possibility, which far transcended the possibilities which Copernicus and Darwin in the physical universe, in the inanimate, and in the not just the heavenly bodies and the stars, but also the primordial biological soup, as they call it in biology, where molecules were first created in the crucible of creation, and then slowly complex proteins and viruses and bacteria, they evolved as they tried to survive. And finally, he formulated a theory which is more or less okay when you consider this short span of human evolution from the amoeba to a human being. But beyond that, there is a higher theory of evolution or involution. How could the intelligence come in the first place? It's not just a product of chemicals which suddenly gives rise to a brain which starts thinking and the consciousness suddenly emerges. No, it should have been there somewhere. That is a more logical theory, that nothing can be produced out of nothing. Something would have existed, that human beings would have been divine in the first place. Only thing, you would have become restricted, and all we need to do is to remove the gross things that are covering that glory, and the glory will become self-manifest. That is what all the great prophets spoke. They spoke of a kingdom of the spirit. What is that spirit? What do you mean by spirit? Is it just a mind? Then we come to Freud, where he he humiliated man to such an extent, and then he thought the life of the spirit, the light of the spirit, is nothing but a mental state. He reduced it to just a simple mental state, and it's a physiological state which uh, sick people manifest. Of course, it may be true certain chemical imbalances may give rise to uh, different personality disorders in a very, very gross way. But they are all limited and distorted views of the human personality. He did not study Jesus or he did not study the great prophets, Buddha and all. Had he done it, because his psychological cases, they were all people who were actually sick, they were suffering. So they were not normal people. People who are normal, who are paranormal, or you can say people who had supersensuous visions, they did not form the object of Freud's study. So his database was limited, and that is why it is more a study of a sick mind, of sick minds, rather than a healthy mind or a transcendental mind, a mind which had infinite number of possibilities open to that mind. So that happened in the case of great prophets who could sway then almost half the world during their lifetime or even after that. People saw that within the 50 years or 100 years or even 500 years after the passing away of these great spiritual personalities, a great movement, people are still adhering to their ideas. They just don't die, and they are living principles. So the very rudiments of life, according to Copernicus, Darwin, and Freud, if we see, who dealt with the inanimate objective world, or the animate or the plant and the animal world of Darwin, and the mental universe of Freud, and the studies they made. No doubt they did a methodical study, and in the limited environment and with the limited database they were, you can say, successful to some extent. But they did not consider the lives of all the human beings, and especially the spiritual human beings, the spiritual beings who have changed the history of the world in their own way. Now, if these are not only limited, distorted, but they are limited views of human personality or human possibilities. Human possibilities. The purpose of discussing these things in this class is that we should not exhaust. Even the possibilities that we discuss are limited in nature. There are infinite number of possibilities. That is why when Swami Vivekananda spoke in the Parliament of Religions, and after that he mentioned one thing, that God or religion is not a closed book. Just as science likes to keep all its theories open for future scrutiny based on new data, they are willing to change. If something new emerges, a new theory emerges which is stronger than the present one, they don't hesitate to replace it. So that is why the same spirit should be followed in the world of the spirit, spiritual discoveries. If somebody discovers something higher than what was popularly believed or popularly proved, so God's revelations or the religion is not a closed book. That is what Swamiji said. Just as scientific discoveries, we have just started exploring the frontiers of science. We have not even explored what consciousness is from a physical level. Even from a physical level, we cannot analyze or try to claim that we have understood everything about the human mind or a human brain or even a simple human cell. Even a cell, all its functions, as days pass, newer and newer theories, these viruses, for example, we do not know how they mutate and why they mutate, who helps them to mutate, how does it happen. We know certain things happen, we observe it, and then we try to find certain remedies. But if you ask the question why, there is very difficult to answer. So also in the physical plane, in the micro world, in the micro universe, the quantum world, we have a vast so many discoveries to be made. They are all incomplete, all are at the most some hypotheses or some theories which have been proved, but under different circumstances they may be proved wrong, as Einstein did. The Newton's laws of motion were definitely, they are applicable even today when you consider things in a very gross way. But you go into the subtle universe, these laws do not stand there. New laws have to be, new quantum laws have to be discovered. And that is how science progresses. But at least they don't stop. They are not like any religion or dogmatic approach to religion which says, no, this is the ultimate truth, we cannot change. No, even Vedanta does not claim it. But there are some religions who believe that their path and their ideas that they believe in are the ultimate, and everybody in the world has to believe. It is like uh, a scientist saying that I believe in Newton's law, and no matter what the environment is, everybody has to maintain or believe in Newton's law. It is not going to happen. This dogmatic approach will never be tolerated by science. If somebody goes to the laboratory and shows that it doesn't work for uh, other environments, where the objects are very fine, some different physics, laws of physics are valid there. So one has to accept with humility the scientific and accept the scientific approach in trying to discuss the human personality in depth. So we should not conclude that Vedanta has said the final word. In fact, Swamiji says we have to go beyond even the Vedas and the Vedanta. That is what the Indian approach made them humble, because we were a land of seekers who always sought to understand the highest mystery. And the moment we got a higher idea, the lower idea was, no doubt it was preserved, because they are all ascending steps. You just, after climbing the staircase or the ladder, you don't just dispose of the ladder. The lower rungs were as important as the higher ones. Only thing, from a higher perspective, you see things more clearly. So, whatever it may be, these limited or distorted views of the inanimate, animate, and even the mind by Copernicus, Darwin, and Freud, they are at the best limited to their own areas of own environment which they could study. Beyond that, there are so many environments where these laws may not be applicable or may not be valid. So, therefore, Vedanta says there will be among men certain personalities who realize their divine nature, which is the spirit, and their conduct, the transformation that they show in moral and spiritual virtues, they are they testify to their inner divine experience. If somebody becomes very moral, very spiritual, very compassionate, and demonstrates activities or demonstrates by his actions that he has transcended ordinary human beings, he is no longer selfish and he no longer competes for the gross things of the world. He has found something higher. Then we have to listen. We have to find out what are the possibilities that he has explored, or he or she, the prophets, have explored. And they say there is a kingdom of spirit which Jesus believed of, which Buddha believed. So there should be some inner experience and some valid proof which Sri Ramakrishna told Swamiji. I can not only experience it, but I can show you in the laboratory of the spirit, in the laboratory of religion. I can show them to you, show these truths. You can experience these truths as you experience the world that you see, but in a more clearer sense. What he meant by that was, if the more you go towards this consciousness, the light of consciousness percolates through your mind in a more clear way, which is known as buddhi, and that illumines all the dark corners, the ignorant corners which were not explored by human beings, and they find that they discover something great. So the supreme one, or the Atman, that is the discovery Vedanta made, is the indwelling spirit in all the living creatures. So Gita, for example, we just have to quote now, but unless you experience it, or unless we experience it, no matter how much of Gita or Upanishads we read, it's not going to help. just as Thakur said, I can shout from the rooftops that this is what I believe in, this is the nature of God. But have you seen him? So that is why Swami Vivekananda was very keen. He said, I don't care what the books write. I have read enough of books. I have not come for a bookish explanation to you. That is a very significant uh, approach to religion. When Vivekananda came, having studied Vedanta, having studied Western philosophy, having studied all the major religions of the world, thanks to his education and the liberal attitude with which his father had trained him, he had a pretty good general knowledge of all the different religions, of different philosophies, Eastern, Western, of music, and of all the fine things that possibly a human being could learn at that age. He was far, far learned for an average man of that age. So he said that even then he had his own doubts. He said, what I have gained is all bookish knowledge. So he says, my master was far superior because he went to the University of Nature. He didn't go to a university where he had to limit himself with the boundaries which were made by the walls of that classroom and study limited ideas, and those ideas would be borrowed and the second hand ideas of thinkers of the world. It was not first hand experience, experiential knowledge. We just believed because Newton said so, because somebody said so, because this philosopher said so, because the Upanishad said so, because the Bible said so, the Quran says so. So these are all different interpretations of different people, and we are just parroting them. We are just repeating what they said. And that is not education. According to Swamiji, he says, it was so refreshing to see Sri Ramakrishna, who never went to school, but his life was spent in the best possible university, the university of life itself, of nature itself, Prakriti herself. And by her grace, she could have that wonderful insight into the different human possibilities other than physical, mental, and even moral. He could go deeper down and find out if there was a God or not, whether there was a soul or not, what is the nature of that soul, what do the scriptures say. Scriptures might say that it is of the nature of pure consciousness, all pervading reality, seated in the heart of all beings. But what is its, what is it to experience this truth? How does one experience this truth? And what transformation takes place? So these things were important, and Swami Vivekananda went to him and then he touched him, and by mere touch he could transfer that spirituality. That's the greatest miracle, not creating certain things and curing certain diseases. They may be gross miracles, but the greatest miracle is to transform the thinking and elevate that human being to his spiritual possibilities. That kind of transformation, to make an ordinary human being into a spiritual being, that is the greatest transformation, because it requires tremendous strength, tremendous powers for that spiritual person, and that is possible only for people who are prophets or incarnations. So Sri Krishna, who was one such incarnation, one such great personality who guided humanity, says, I am the self. The self is existing in the hearts of all beings. The spiritual heart, as I told you, the not the physical heart, but the heart where your deepest consciousness of ego lies. When you feel some pain, for example, physically you point to a certain place in the heart. You say, actually you feel the nervous energy perhaps focuses in a particular spot within the heart, within the center of the body, that is the heart. And you feel, you identify with that pain, with that sorrow, and you really feel the physical effects of that pain. And even in joy, when you say, I am joyful, you find that pleasure to have it center in the center of the heart. So that is why when The Supreme One is described in the Gita as the Self. The Supreme Self is the Self, which is a consciousness which is in the heart of all beings. So that is the place where consciousness, as it were, sheds its light upon the mind, the prana, and also the physical body. That is how a human being lives. When the person dies, he does his Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha. The two outer coverings are taken away from him, but he still survives. That is the immortality of the soul, because the consciousness is something which can never be negated. The light can never go. It is the darkness that we have to remove. It is capable of cutting through the, or maybe revealing itself through the outer layers which we have falsely identified ourselves with. So Vedanta never denies the soul, the spiritual self, to any sentient being, but acknowledges its infinite variations in manifestation. So the question arises whether the animals have a soul. Everybody, the consciousness is at the root of all inanimate and animate, but it can be realized only by sentient human beings, because they have that capacity to touch that consciousness, though they may not merge with that. Then it would be samadhi, but till then, that inkling, that connection, if you think deeply also, if you feel deeply, if you meditate deeply, this infinite variations in manifestation. Some people are highly spiritual, some are less, some are like at the animal level, some are even animals, some are plants. So the manifestation that you see in Prakriti has its own gradations, has its own level, and its manifestation is according to the development of the mind, because mind is something finer than matter. Physically there may be not much difference between an ape and a human being. It also has a heart. In fact, a baboon's heart is sometimes transplanted. When you see the heart transplants, you take the heart of certain animals which are nowadays used. So physically there is not much difference between the animal kingdom and the human beings. But what makes it far superior, the human being far superior, is the development of the mind. A superior type of mind, a finer type of mind, which is not just a reactive mind, but the buddhi, makes a human being dive deep into his own subjective reality and find out what is that consciousness. That pursuit after consciousness, that pursuit after human possibilities, which are other than physical and mental, is a unique gift which we have, mankind has. In the human life alone, it may be there in animals, but in the human life alone, the realization of the self or that consciousness within becomes possible. It is this self-knowledge or God vision, if you call whichever name you can say, or you can say Mahaparinirvana, Mahanirvana, Nirvana, Moksha, or salvation, or the vision of the God vision that the devotional scriptures speak of, a personal God who is a personal manifestation of the uh, highest consciousness. So devoid of supreme devotion to the highest, not only in the aspect with form. It's not that only you love the human, you have devotion for the uh, personified God or avatara, but even the formless God. They cannot be attained by just doing good karma or meritorious deeds. That deep desire, that deep yearning to understand the truth and to live up to it, that transformation is not attained by just following certain moral virtues or dogmas or some religious rituals. The individual may go higher or to lower planes of existence according to his merits and demerits. He may be born with a strong body, a strong mind, depending on his karma. That is true. But he has to come back and take up a human life. That is what Vedanta says. It is because he may go down in the evolution. He may go back if he has so much bad karma. But then again, he has to come back, take his human life, develop his consciousness, and when the effects of those bad deeds are over, he gets a better life. That is how moral virtues, though not directly but indirectly, they help us to get rid of so much of baggage, bad baggage of the past. And finally, we reach the highest, the glory of human existence you can feel. But ultimately, Vedanta says it's our privilege that we are born as human beings. So we can undertake fresh karma, positive karma, or also evil karma, and then go down and also cultivate self-knowledge. Go beyond the creation of good and bad karma, because we know ultimately the bad karma is exhausted, the good karma is exhausted. Then we have to give up our heavens and other things which for which we did all these meritorious deeds. Many religions tell you meritorious deeds. Even Hinduism tells you to take you to heaven after you die. Even Yama told Nachiketa in the Kathopanishad that it is possible if you do certain sacrifices, you give away in charity, do so many good things. Naturally, you can live in heaven, but the since the actions that you have done were limited, your heaven stay in heaven also will be limited. Nobody will stay in heaven, or eternal hell for the little good or bad they might have done. They might have done good for 500 years. For that, they can't be infinitely uh, 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 asked to stay in heaven. That is not going to happen, depending on how much karma you have. That's why the Hindus are more logical in the sense they say that your heaven is also transient. And the real people who aspire for freedom, they say we don't want to go to heaven because we know that after a certain time we'll be thrown back and we have to again accumulate karma. So we don't want to do that. We have to somehow transcend these ideas of heaven and hell and go beyond good and bad deeds. Do good deeds to counter bad deeds. That's the only value it has got. But we have to cultivate this so-called self-knowledge, or Atma Gyan as it is known. Atma Gyan means knowledge about the true self, of the true subject. Now the subject is clouded by ignorance, which is the result of the true subjectivity is lost because the subject has got mixed up with the object. That is what the Brahma Sutras, and then commenting the first Brahma Sutras, which is uh, a text of pure Vedanta, Shankaracharya says, this mixing, this mysterious mixing of existence and non-existence between the fine, or between the consciousness and the things which are inert, somehow they seem to mix. In Sankhya, they say that they are different entities. Purusha is different, the conscious principle, and the inert principle is Prakriti. And that is manifested in the universe through the help of three gunas. That is a fine theory. Vedanta accepts it. But the fact that they are two eternally separate and you have to separate the Purusha and Prakriti, then only the Purusha shines in its own light. Vedanta says, no, that covering also was some kind of ignorance. It is through ignorance that the subject identifies itself with the object. It is like a king going to his kingdom and behaving as if he is an ordinary citizen. He knows that he is the king, but he has to play act. Many of the kings used to go in disguise. So also, we know our true nature. It is divine. It is Brahman itself. But we like to be imprisoned through, and we not like, we due to ignorance, we are imprisoned in our body and mind, the psychophysical complex. So, human life is no doubt very short and frail. It may be enough to earn merit and go to heaven, or if we are unlucky, we do a lot of evil things which can push us down to hell. But even then, that short life, whatever you get, it is no doubt short and frail. It is anytime anything can happen and one can die. Compared to the vast history of mankind, our lifespan is hardly 100 years at the most. So if it is rightly lived, even in those 100 years, it will help us as a springboard. We have to use it to enter that life eternal, because other prophets, other great souls have showed it in their own lives that using this human body, according to Shankaracharya and Vivek Chudamani, he says three things are very, very rare. First is human birth. After having got this human birth, that desire to transcend the self, to reach the self and transcend the psychophysical vehicle, that is desire for moksha, desire to be free. This is also very rare. You might get a human birth, which is also difficult to get, but after having got that human birth, you might not have the desire for moksha. You might regress to become an animal, which is possible according to Vedanta. If you constantly commit selfish, evil-minded acts, then you become more and more gross. And maybe when you die, you have those animal instincts. It's not impossible to be born as an animal again, because you had lot of karma which uh, pushed you back in the ladder of evolution. So no doubt evolution is always working towards higher and higher bodies human beings get, but at the end of it, at some stage, we realize that we have to go further, we have to evolve further. And that is what happens when we transcend that, try to transcend it, the psychophysical, even the mind which limits us. A crude mind will limit us more. A reactive mind will limit us more. A highly sattvic mind, full of buddhi, will limit us less, but ultimately sattva also binds. We think we are good people, we are honest people, we are moral people. That's very good, but that's not the goal of life. You have to rise to that level. Everybody has to pass through all these stages, but the real goal is mukti, or freedom from both bad first and then good also. Why should we transcend good? Because the purpose of good is to just counteract the kleshas which counteract the bad kleshas. The bad samskaras have to be counteracted, and for that we need to do good. But if we indefinitely try to do good, this life is short. You no doubt you die with a huge accumulation of good actions. That you will be given, as Gita says, you will be born in a family of yogis or a rich house. But if you misuse it again, you might go back several lives and regress and go back into that animal life again. If you misuse your wealth, if you misuse the birth that was given to you by your good karma in a family of yogis, all of them do not take to the path of yoga, though they have a better chance if they wish to carry on their onward journey. So now this was the introduction. Now we will be trying the first chapter, the first 4 chapters explain to us what is man, what is the self, and what are the constituents of the psychophysical vehicle that we ignorantly think is our own. We are residing in that psychophysical vehicle. We are the owners, or we may be the masters of that chariot which is moving. We are not the chariot itself. That is the major mistake we make. Human being has to understand this fact that our body is like a chariot. It is meant for traveling. After the journey is over, when you reach the goal or the destination, you have to get down out of it. That is all the purpose that the chariot serves. But if you identify with the chariot and intend to eternally live with that chariot, then you are not going to reach the goal. Someday or the other, you have to detach yourself from this chariot. After it has finished, taken you across the line, taken you to your destination. So what is this psychophysical vehicle? What is this psychophysical vehicle of man, and what is this strange thing which we call as self? is, so Swami Vivekananda gave a beautiful talk, the real and the apparent man. So he speaks of the real man, which is the spirit, and the apparent man, which is a mild reflection of that spirit into matter. So man, the real man and the apparent man, what is the distinction? So let us explore that, because we know we are, most of us, till we reach the state of mukti, we are identifying ourselves with our apparent selves. The apparent man, we know about that apparent man. But who is the real man behind my apparent nature? The real man, the knower within, which knows all the phenomena outside, whether it is subtle, gross, or my own body or outside of the body, everything, for everything there is a knower. The eyes see, the ears hear, the mouth speaks, the nose smells, all these things go in as input, and the knower sees it, reacts to it, through the mind he expresses, and through the karmendriya he acts. I think something, I see something, I think, I analyze it and use the buddhi to the extent my buddhi is developed, and that buddhi gives out the thoughts and we express it. So that is, this knowing principle within me is constant. This knowing principle has seen better days. This knowing principle has known worse days, when we are sick, when we are happy, when we are healthy, when we are sorrowful, when we are joyful. But the witness has not changed. I don't say that it was a separate witness which saw my childhood. I have seen some continuity. I have seen some continuity since I was born. I say that I was like this. I was denied these things. I was given these things by my parents. My friends were like this. Who is that I which was 10 years ago? The same I is continuing now. The knower within has not changed. He is the same consciousness. But depending on the circumstances, the apparent man with whom I identify myself change. Now I have a particular name. When I was small, I had a nickname perhaps. I was known as a shy or a bold or a brave or a restless, or I had so many characteristics. As I grow, I change. The apparent man keeps on changing. But the real man within doesn't change. And the challenge is to understand who is the real I. So if you see the great Raman Maharshi, he said all our effort outside is waste. So you just try to find out only one question, you go on asking, what is my real self? What is the self? If you persist and just meditate on the self, then all the apparent things which have clung to the real self will fall off. That is one way of doing sadhana. There are other ways of doing the same, exploring the possibilities of the spirit. There are various paths. Each religion is a path. Each sect within the religion is also a path, depending on which method you use, which method appeals to you. The paths keep on changing, but the goal does not change. So the central principle of consciousness, or the knower within, it is distinct from the body, the organs, the sense organs, and the mind. This is the fundamental thing you should remember. The real man, which is the central principle of consciousness, the awareness, the knower within, is different from the body. When I say my eyes, my body, my mouth, I identify with something which is external to me. When I say my body, when I was a child, it was a small body. Now the same self within, the same knower within says, now I say I'm my body, it is grown in size, grown in weight, grown in intellect, grown in as it were, the goals have changed. The goals keep on changing. Finally, if you are sensible enough, as Ramakrishna said, there's only one goal, that is to realize your true self. God realization is the only goal of life. Whether you call it self-realization or God realization, it is the same thing. And the day we do that and we consider our own self as distinct from body, organs, and the mind, then definitely we reach the goal of our life. But the curious thing is, with all his pretensions that I am rich, man does not know himself. If anybody says, I know myself, who I am, we can show that he is not true. So with all his pretensions, with all his so-called advancement in knowledge, to know many things is one thing. To know oneself as one is, the real knower within, to know the central principle of consciousness, is entirely different. So man may claim that I know who I am, but I really do not know. On the contrary, every human being has a mistaken notion or mistaken idea of himself. Some will say I am a weak man, a strong man, a rich man, a cultured man, an uncultured man. There are so many different adjectives that can be given. So if he mistakes himself and says that the embodied existence of mine is what I really am, then it is wrong, because that embodied existence changes. Every second as I speak, I change. I am a totally different person. But because over a period of time, we understand that what I was 2 years ago, I shall not remain. I'll start growing old. And of course, one day the physical age will catch up and I may have to give up that physical self to assume another body. So an embodied being very often is not aware of the indwelling self, which is pure consciousness, but he identifies himself with his dwelling, with the chariot on which he is riding. So imagine you are riding a chariot and suddenly you feel that you are one with the chariot. You cannot think of yourself as something without the chariot. So you think the chariot is you and you are the chariot. So you don't want to leave that chariot. You are still riding it. But that will not help. When the goal comes, the driver himself will tell you, your buddhi will tell you, now you get down, you reach the goal. This chariot is not your home is there. So that is why that beautiful song which Naren sang before Sri Ramakrishna, after his first meeting, he was asked to sing. Then he sang that beautiful song, Mano chalo nija niketane. Oh my mind, oh my body, go back to your home. You're just a traveler. Sansar Videshe. You come to a foreign land and that too you're traveling. So that is not your real home. If possible, use that chariot of the mind, the body, go back home, get down and settle yourself there. So mana chalo nija niketane. Go back, oh mind. Don't wander. Just go back to your own self. The knower within, the central principle of our consciousness which does not die. If you go back to your own home, which is this pure consciousness, then there will be no more suffering. So everybody thinks of himself and other individuals around him with whom he is interacting in terms of physical exchange or at the most mental exchange. I like somebody, I dislike somebody, I like somebody's thoughts, I like somebody's words, I don't like somebody's words. I get upset when somebody says something very silly, apparently very silly. You don't have to identify with somebody's thoughts. If somebody says, oh, you are emotional, you are this, you are that, or you are weak, you are strong, it doesn't make us that. He is estimating you in his estimation. You are what he thinks you are. So a wise person will not take anybody's comments, or he should not expect his comments also about others. He should not find faults with others. Holy Mother said, even Jesus said, such a wonderful psychological truth, judge not that ye be not judged. If you judge others, then you have to give them, then they will judge you and then you will quarrel with each other. That is because you don't know the spirit. You don't know the Father in heaven. You don't know that you are the spirit. So that's why Jesus said, if you keep judging each other and hating each other or loving each other because of the physical tenement or the physical chariot. Oh, you have a beautiful chariot, but what of it? The person is not the chariot. You don't love a person's car. If you love a person or if you hate a person, you may hate his car, you may love his car, but that is not as good as loving him or hating him. So that is why we judge others according to our vision. If we think physical beauty is everything, then a very strong person will appeal to us. And many people do that. Those who are just after physical glory, they will appreciate all the bodybuilders and people with strong bodies and beautiful features. For them, that is everything. If a man has good features or a woman has good features, strong body, a good body, and uh, all these things appeal to them because their vision is very gross. Some people may go a step ahead and say, no, no, I want a beautiful mind. It's not enough to have a beautiful body with a very ugly mind. That will not help. So they want a rounded personality, one who has a beautiful body with a beautiful mind. But even then, with all these things, there are other things. There may be a good mind, a good body, but at the same time, it it may not have those kind of spiritual insight. That good body or the good mind may not be sustainable as it grows old. Unless that power of the spirit is there, they will get depressed, they will think, oh, I'm getting old. The worries, anxieties will start. Those who place their entire identification with their young, strong bodies, normally you will find when they grow old, they feel not a lot of dejection because they find this was the my identity of which I was very proud. But that beauty has gone, that strength has gone, that mind has gone. Things have become weak due to illness, due to old age. And then he or she feels that they are lost. They're lost because their false identification with the gross has been corroded. To put, for lack of a better word, I'm saying that it has slowly gone away. It has withered away. And then they see this was the body, and some people in the mirror, when they see, they said, oh, see, years ago this was my photo, how I looked and how I changed now over a period of time. So all these things is because of our false identification with the gross or even with the mind, which is also changing. We had a weak mind, we had a strong mind, and suddenly we feel my mind is becoming weaker, I'm forgetting things. You see all these things happening in life. So transformation is the rule. The changes in the physical body, the changes in the mental makeup of the body, of the mind, these are going to change over a period of time because they're transitory. But what doesn't change is the knower within, the consciousness within. And the sooner and at an early age, if we manage before we get really old, when our senses and all our will and our capacity to go after these things, to yearn and to achieve spiritual progress or discover these infinite possibilities, are become weaker and weaker, then it is very difficult. That's why they say if you want to become a sportsman, you have to try at a younger age. After a certain age, even if the will is there, even if the mind is there, you can't go beyond. The body simply will not support. That is why Jesus said the spirit is strong, but the flesh is weak. What he meant was be up and doing, do whatever you have to at a younger age. The spirit is strong, but the flesh is weak. Spirit in this context means the mind. The mind may be strong, the desire to achieve freedom may be strong, salvation may be strong, desire to know God may be strong, but the flesh has its own lifespan. So It is not just a case that we do not know. It's not just blissful ignorance. People have been telling it for ages. If we don't pay heed to that, if we think that let us now be busy with the body and with the mind, later on we will think about the higher things. Now my body is fine, I don't have to care, but nature is not so kind. So man pays very heavily, man or woman pays very heavily for this misconception of himself. All his bondage, all our bondages, all our sufferings are because of uh, this misconception of ourselves. The sooner it goes, the sooner we try to, at least try to understand who is the knower within and follow a life which will really empower us, which will spiritually empower us. And the more we understand, we are not this misconception that we are the body which is going to get old, which is going to get weaker and weaker as days pass. The earlier that misconception goes, the earlier of the misconception that I am a very intelligent person and I can achieve anything I want. All these misconceptions, the sooner we understand, it's not that we have to give up that we have to reside in the body, we have to reside in the mind. But we have to know that when these temporary things go away from us, our health goes, our age is not on our side, when the mind becomes weaker and weaker, the bondages and sufferings will be felt intensely. That is why we hate to get old. So, and the loneliness that we feel is something, that self-identity, because we have never tried even to adjust to, if we had held on to our consciousness, the knower within, then whatever happens, you would not feel lonely. You know that you are with your Lord, the Lord is always with you. The idea of loneliness comes only to people who are physically thrown away by society, as it were. Nobody likes them because they are physically and mentally not so attractive now. Their need is over. Just as we throw away used and old cars, society throws us away. That is the rule of Prakriti. It may be a very harsh law, a harsh rule, but that is what it is. And we just feel, maybe the old car which we throw away into the scrap, it may be feeling the same thing. I served my master for such a long time. And now, because I am not fit enough, I have been just thrown away into scrap. So that is what happens to every human being. If we are obsessed with the idea of the body and the mind and the pride and the ego and all those things, then, and if we do not, when the time is still, when we are still young, if we don't try to identify ourselves with the spirit, then loneliness, anxiety, worries, diseases, many things, bondages and sufferings will make our life miserable. So anyway, we will see if there are some questions. Yeah. Today's talk seems like poet Tagore expressed in the views that which is endless, who then can talk about the last word of that means Brahma. Is it? Yes, poets have expressed in different ways. Each way is correct. There's no such thing as correct or incorrect. Everybody tries to paint the infinite with his own words, but they are, after all, words. They're coming out of the mouth. Just as I am speaking, the words will engage us in something more serious. If it remains words, if we just go back, it is like forgetting the knower, forgetting the central principle of consciousness and running after higher things. They are definitely better to read the beautiful poetry, the great philosophies. They're definitely better than enjoying good food and parties and all those things. Definitely they are a higher kind of enjoyment, and it gives us food for thought, not only pleasure, reading this poetry, Upanishads, poems, even some noble ideas, noble books. They at least prevent, if not give us the highest realization, they at least prevent the mind from going to something greater and greater misconceptions of ourselves. The gross identification, at least for some time, is not there. So in that way, it is acceptable, in the sense it is acceptable because something is better than nothing. So we have to constantly make efforts, read poetry, sing songs. Of course, Mano Chalo Nija Niketan, it's a beautiful song. It gives us a picture if we take it seriously. But if we just sing it for the sake of music and get appreciation, and then the whole thing ends. Oh, he sang a beautiful song, or she sang a beautiful song. But what of it? Have I understood the spirit behind that song? Thakur also used to sing in his beautiful voice. Naren also used to sing. But it made a huge difference because they took that song seriously. The ideas behind it seriously. So reading Tagore or reading the gospel doesn't make us Sri Ramakrishna or even Tagore. It may be a beautiful idea, but how that idea has impacted our own life, how has it helped in transforming us, how serious we have become, how much of the misconception that we are the bodies and the mind we have given up, and how close we are to the central principle of consciousness, the Atman, the Brahman. That is more important. So whatever takes you there, whether good songs, good poetry, everything is acceptable if it points to the central principle of consciousness. That is the idea. Can truth, reality be realized even keeping the object, the scene as it is? Definitely, that is known as Jivan Mukti. Truth and reality is neither subjective nor objective. We begin with the subjective, and when Sri Ramakrishna used to beautifully tell this, that when we climb a stair, we want to go to the terrace. We see the steps are made of different stones and cement, and then we go to the next, again we see the same stones, but we are ascending all the same. And when we reach the terrace and then we have already reached, but after that also we see the same staircase is there below. The material of the terrace is the same as the material of the steps below. So then they come back down, but now they come with the knowledge that the same material is used all along. But while going, they were not sure. People were not sure whether, so they had to give up the object. We do not know what that subject is. When we go towards the Atman, nearer and nearer we go. After going, when we realize the subject, then we come down, then we can accept the objective world. Before that, we have to negate it. Negate it means do not allow it, we should not allow the objective world to think that it is the subject. The objective world, the money should not make me feel proud that I am a rich man. The body, the beautiful body should not make me feel that this body is going to last eternally. So mistaking the object for the subject is dangerous. But having realized the subject, then you can live, or whether you live with the object or not, it doesn't make any difference. Because as I said, Jivan Muktas, they keep the body, they keep their mind, they do everything that a normal human being does, but they have strongly identified with their subject or the pure consciousness. Yes. So another question is there. Swamiji said man progresses from higher truth to higher. So seems to infer no regression. No, he said we travel from lower truth to higher. We can't say higher truth to higher. There is a truth which is at a lower level. So lower truth to higher we go. But he didn't say that people cannot go from higher truth to lower. Normally, how we ascend, get up the ladder is, but there are many cases where people unable to ascend any higher, they sometimes regress. In human beings, it happens. A person who may be full of good karma and he may go and suddenly may turn evil. So regression is possible, definitely. But still, if he has to go, yes, he doesn't go to from untruth to truth. What Swamiji's point was, you don't travel from untruth or false to the truth. You travel from a lower truth to higher truth. If you make progress, but if you regress, you go from higher truth, then go back to the lower truth which you had left because you were not convinced. The higher truth was too much for us. If, as Swami Vivekananda saw, or even Hriday, he wanted the highest truth. He wanted the vision. Sri Ramakrishna touched him, he got the vision. He says, no, 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 no. He started shouting. Then Thakur had to come and touch him and said, now you go back. Because in that rarefied atmosphere of higher truth, everybody cannot feel comfortable. They have to come back. There's a beautiful story of two friends, women who, one was selling flowers, a flower seller with a beautiful smelling flower she was selling. Another was a fish seller. So she used to carry the fish. She was used to the fish smell. So one day what happened? She lost her way, or she was late. She said, today I'll rest in your house. I can't reach home. So she stays in the female companion, in the flower seller's house. But at night, when she tries to sleep, she cannot sleep because the smell of the flowers were different than the smell of the fish. Though it was a good smell, it was a higher truth. The higher truth is always not palatable. So she requests her friend, you see, can I bring that basket, fish basket, and keeps it near her, and that with that fish smell she can sleep very well. That is because she was used to the fish smell. If one is used or attached to the lower truth, he might be pushed or he might himself go, but he finds that this higher truth is too hard for me to digest. Let me go back. So that is when regression takes place. So progress, of course, takes place from lower truth to higher truth, not from error to truth. That is what Swamiji said. Okay. Yes, definitely Judas' life shows that though he was so much attached to Christ, he loved Jesus so much, but then even he someday betrayed. So that was a kind of regression. It's not that later on he might have again ascended by the grace of Jesus, but for some time, though he was given, I mean, he was full of that spirit of Christ, somehow he seemed to regress because his samskaras or his weakness rather made him betray Jesus. Yes, that is true. So I'll conclude now. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.